Hello, everybody. Welcome to the last day of Charleston, or I hope that you're having a good last day of Charleston. My name is Nettie Lagace. I work at NISO, and I'm here with Alan Jones of NYU to talk about what's going on with the NISO controlled digital lending work that we've been working on for the last few years. So I'm going to fly through just a few slides, and I think most of you know these things anyway, so I just want to basically set up Alan. We're working on a recommended practice, and NISO publishes recommended practices and standards. And they are similar documents in that they help industry, people, organizations, entities connect to each other either through interoperability, technical interoperability, shared vocabularies, descriptions of processes, to help institutions, organizations improve their processes and ease workflows. So really benefiting everyone in the picture. That's the high view of standards and recommended practices. And at NISO, we have a pretty formal standards process because we are accredited by the American National Standards Institute, which wants to impress upon certain values of openness, process, ability to appeal, all those kinds of things. In this case, for the controlled digital lending, we are working on a recommended practice, which is a lower level document and doesn't require the same ANSI formalities, but just because we like to do things the same way, we do follow pretty much the same processes. So at this point, we are almost 2 years into the process where we're finishing it up. And we're past the NISO receives a proposal. Our voting members approved it. We formed the working group. Early on, they determined the scope and the deliverables. Quite a long time to gather input because it's a new area and there's a lot of thinking that needs to be done about how can we organize this space or think about what are the gaps and how can they be filled. And then also, as you can imagine how much fun it is to draft something technical and complicated, that has been the process that Alan will describe. But soon we will be moving to a public review. So I expect you will see that in the near future where you will be able to see the draft and respond to it and have the working group consider your comments as we then publish the final version, which I hope will be early next year, and then we'll move into a maintenance cycle. Did I mention that, I don't think I did mention that all of the NISO work is done by volunteers. I am an employee of NISO and I manage the groups, but the people in the groups and the people doing the input gathering and the drafting are all people who have day jobs and feel that it is important to get together with other people in the industry to put these things together. But I really, we wouldn't be anywhere without volunteers like Alan, like people like you in the audience. So thank you. And I think that's it for, I think I mentioned standards and recommended practices. Recommended practices are lower level documents. That's what we're doing here. And they are more suited to fast moving emerging areas, which I think you would agree that controlled digital lending is. And it provides some room for potential adoption. Things are not set in stone. There are no musts in recommended practices. There are shoulds and mays in recommended practices. So that's it.
Hey everyone, I'm Alan Jones. I'm actually from the New School. I'm not from NYU. No worries. But anyway, this is the third Charleston that we've actually talked about controlled digital lending. I don't know if you remember, but the first one was basically what is controlled digital lending. The second one was a game show where we actually did red light, green light. And this is just kind of a conclusion of some of that whole process. So also want to just recognize that Michael Rodriguez, who's on the working group, as well as Jill Morris and a few others are here as well. So it truly is a kind of village to get this going. I do want to say that the scope of the NISO document is going to be technical. It is not going to be legal. There may be things that are important technical requirements in order to achieve certain types of functionality like own to loan. And I'm going to talk or go through some of what that technical implementation is. How you implement it at your institution is your business. I'm not a lawyer. And certainly when it comes to risk assessment, the New School and NYU were part of the Basic Books versus Kinko's lawsuit. So you can imagine that we're quite conservative when it comes to permissions and that kind of thing. So with that, I try to do everything I can to actually look at how we can technically implement some of these practices. Some of the requirements, these are the functional requirements for controlled digital lending. Restricting access, obviously we need to authorize and we need to authenticate in order to make sure that the person who they say they are the person who are actually requesting the book. Own to loan, one of the things that's really important about controlled digital lending is that print and e and the circulation of that actually remains constant. So if a digital object is out there, a physical object is sequestered or suppressed from public access. Technical level, different types of items controls. This could be that the file can't be copied, it can't be redistributed, it can't be printed, or this type of thing. So there need to be certain types of controls within the actual interface that are imposed for this type of thing. Now, one of the problems with this is that many of these different types of controls will actually get in the way of accessibility. And so part of what we're going to be talking about is a theme that's actually been running through the entire group, specifically around the issue of accessibility. You can see here, these are the different components, whether it's a digital repository. Discovery is optional. I don't know in what universe it is, but implying a discovery layer is actually optional. Certainly authorization and access controls, the physical inventory, and the user interface of the actual digital repository. One of the things I want to stress here is that controlled digital lending is actually part of a broader ecosystem of digital lending. And what I mean by that basically is that there can be licensed material, there could be controlled digital lending, there could be owned digital lending. One of the nice kind of byproducts out of talking about controlled digital lending is, what if a library got into the business of actually acquiring files instead of a license hosted by a vendor? Controlled digital lending can actually do a lot of that same type of technology. So there are different types of publishing models as well as different types of distribution models when we actually think about what a controlled digital lending system should actually do. Obviously, open content, free to read content should be available there, as well as ebook interlibrary lending. And so when you think about the entire universe, the whole goal here is to use the same delivery channel regardless of what license scenario or what copyright scenario you might be distributing material through. One of the things that we talked a little bit about was that CDL requires a bunch of labor. One of the things, whether it's scanning, converting the text and correcting it, assembling the digital objects, creating structural tags for navigation, the higher you set the bar for accessibility, the more labor you're actually going to need. So in this, it's really important within your planning process that you actually think about how it is that you're going to staff this from the library side. It also requires labor at the stacks. There are different types of sequestering models. One of them that's been adopted is you pre-sequester things, very similar to what we're doing with course reserves right now, where we actually grab the material, we put it behind a reserves desk or something like that, and then we don't actually put it back out there into the public until after that reserves period is actually over. Within a closed stack, you can just turn requestability on and off. You don't need to actually move the item. But what if an item is actually in an open stack? Think about this for a second. You're going to have to send a person off to the stacks. They're going to have to retrieve the item, and then they're going to have to release the digital loan. Now, there's a lot of, when you think about the logistics of that, that could be a paging report. It could be a whole bunch of different types of ILS-based functionality that's going to have to be there in order to support that OpenStack and digital access at the same time. One of the things that we also looked at were different types of synchronization scenarios between digital and print inventories. One of the things here, you can see that if the barcode is actually in the digital repository as well as in the physical repository, you can actually synchronize the two systems using a circulation protocol like SIP2 or like NSIP. One of the things that's very interesting about this is when you think about the digital owned type of thing, a barcode could effectively be a fungible token that mimics a barcode. So not only are we thinking about the physical items, but control could actually not have a physical item to it, but actually have a license key. And some of these types of different scenarios begin kind of expanding the idea of what controlled lending actually is. But the core of it, and I hear Kyle Courtney in my head every time I turn around, is that the digital object should behave like the print book. It could also be metadata based. So in this particular case, depending on your ILS or your scenario, this may include things like the volume, the issue, the part, the enumeration, that you may actually have multiple copies of a physical item in your physical inventory, a digital object in your digital repository, and you may be able to circulate multiple copies based on the fact that you actually have multiple physical copies of that thing. If you need to buy more copies, you can buy more copies, and that would allow you to circulate more digital materials. That can be done with this metadata-based synchronization process. With respect to digital models, there have been a lot of discussions about 4 different models of delivery. One of them is the pre-sequestered thing where I was talking about course reserves, right? In this particular instance, the only thing we're circulating is the digital object. And so that's model 1. Model 2 is effectively working directly with the ILS. Model 3 is actually a consortial system which looks at the entire physical inventory as one collection. So you could effectively be circulating a digital copy in one institution and sequestering it in another. And then 4th is how these different systems actually communicate requests back and forth between one another. In this particular case, you can I'm going to use an industry example here. If you can think about how does Iliad deal with CDL requests, right? And 2 different Iliad instances actually deal with CDL requests. This type of request management software has to be able to support controlled digital lending scenarios. There are many technologies involved in actually making that loan actually happen. You'll see some here, whether it be discovery, whether it be circulation, whether it be request and supply side communication between the different systems. One of them is an NISO group that I work on that's called 1866. I have to say that I am contractually obligated to say that number in my presentations. I'm joking, it's just a really cool number to say. But this particularly has to do with interlibrary lending transactions. There's been a recent revision to this that allows things like controlled digital lending, ebook lending, and then it also allows for things like shipping of physical objects. It allows you to actually send tracking information back and forth. There's also different types of services that require different types of metadata. So how do you discover the item? How do you describe the item? Is it a separate holding? Is it a linked holding in terms of the physical and the digital representation? How do I request something? That's particularly important for things like OpenURL. How do I actually synchronize the physical and digital inventories like we talked about before? You can see that there are certain types of recommendations that are important either for lending or for actually describing something. If you can imagine a union catalog, it's really important to know if a potential library delivers a mobile copy of that or if it's actually a browser-based thing. Or maybe aptly, What's the OCR accuracy of that thing? If you're running a screen reader, for example, are you going to want to know the word accuracy? Are you going to want to know the character accuracy? Are you going to want to know the phrase accuracy? There are many different types of technologies that will, if you think about how your OCR actually scans, is the header of your chapter page included in the body of your text? That's a nightmare for a screen reader. And so when you think about different types of phrase accuracy or this type of technology, there are different types of technologies that can actually remove those types of things. They're starting to become much more available with different types of predictive artificial intelligence. It's called intelligent document processing as opposed to OCR. Those different types of approaches should be used when you're actually capturing text. And more scanning vendors are actually moving to IDP solutions. So you can see here are some of the different types of problems that I was talking about before. Your accessibility rating, there's currently a proposal at PCC to actually include the vendor accessibility rating for the platform. That's fine for Born Digital, but it's horrible for anything that's been converted from an image. And so thinking about a numeric value as opposed to a WCAG rating makes much more sense in those types of scenarios when you're actually trying to advertise the availability of text within a CDL object. Other types of things that are a problem, when you start thinking about ILL, for example, if NYU and us actually want to trade an item back and forth, we have to be able to share credentials so that the NYU patron can actually log into New School's authentication system. This can be done either through one-time passwords, it can be done through tokens, or it can be done through different types of hashes. So one of the ways that's been talked about and that the group is going to be recommending is something like OAuth. In one of our focus groups, somebody actually said this should be as easy to share as a Google Doc. And so if you think about that level of ease for a controlled digital lending item, thinking about the technology that supports it underneath brings up a lot of different types of problems. For example, privacy. Being able to actually talk about, and disclose what the actual person's or the supplying library's information policies are regarding personal data. This is going to be something that's going to become much more standard practice. We've all kind of shared our Google accounts with services like Lucidchart or Doodle or other types of things. We need to actually have privacy disclosures as far as how long is my patron data actually going to be in this other system? Do I have a right for that system to forget me? And these types of things need to be part of this authentication process. Other types of things, I've talked a little bit about accessibility, things like optical character recognition, advocating for different types of intelligent document processing. Some scanning vendors are looking at places like Cloudflare or Tesseract from Amazon or other types of intelligent document processing services. As you look at scanning vendors or upgrade your software, connect with them and make sure that they're actually implementing these types of services. Yep. So here are some of the final recommendations from the NISO CDL group. Some of this is in regard to some of these standards. Others are related to publishers when they come to actually creating a body of subject matter experts so that we can actually have some of these conversations, both from the technical side as well as from the publishing side. Again, using the same applications for different types of lending scenarios, and then actually looking at different types of copyright code in sections 107, 108, and 109 to really think about how controlled digital lending can actually fit into those services. Finally, I wanted to just end on this. There are different models of ebook sales and digital ownership that are emerging. Certainly, this type of mass digitization that could potentially be done by libraries, the publishers don't have the staff to do it, but it's content that we want to have either in different types of artificial intelligence training or other types of things. So this text is effectively captured in books and can't be used for LLMs. And so there's a very interesting opportunity here for publishers to actually collaborate with libraries who do have the cultural imperative to preserve some of this material, as well as the scale and resources to digitize this material. So one of the things that is being talked about is where are the areas of common ground between publishers and libraries, and where can we both mutually benefit? So with that, I just want to present our roadmap as far as when the delivery of the final paper is going to be. And if anybody has any questions, we'll wait until the end. Otherwise, I'm going to turn it over to Rice.
Great, thank you. I'm Rice Majors from University of California, Davis, where I'm an AUL. I'm also the principal investigator for Project Lend, which is what I'm here to talk to you about today. And this is rooted in something that I think a lot of us already know, which is that scholars interact with books in a lot of ways that are not reading a book cover to cover. And in fact, reading a book cover to cover might be a kind of platonic ideal that is an edge case in higher education. Scholars use parts of books, they use parts of lots of books in combinations, and they want to interact with books that are maybe not always reading. Maybe they want to do a search, get some search results, get the abstracts of those things, and then have that rendered from text to speech so that they can listen to it and figure out what if the search results are interesting while they're engaging in another activity. So these are a few ideas that came up when we did a lightweight survey of our University of California 10 campus of our faculty and grad students toward the end of our ETOS engagement with HathiTrust. And even with the restrictions that HathiTrust put on the digital corpus that they made available during the pandemic, people were able to see use cases that were just out of reach, and it really inspired a lot of some interesting thoughts. I distinguish our work here from two things that already have a lot of momentum in our community and have been adjudicated or are being adjudicated right now in the courts. So one is mediated data mining, which HathiTrust has supported for a number of years. The user does not have direct access to the corpus. They work through some channels to get access to do their project, and that has already been adjudicated and didn't go to the Supreme Court, but there's a pretty strong ruling in favor of HathiTrust on that. And then obviously controlled digital lending is sort of being adjudicated in the courts right now because of the Internet Archive case, which did not follow exactly the contours of controlled digital lending, but it's kind of coming along for the ride. So this is a 2-year project funded by the Mellon Foundation. It's the 10 campus system of University of California working in consortium, in consort with HathiTrust, who was written into the grant to help us explore how we might be able to advocate for expanded digital access, lawful access to these digital texts that we have created through the Google Books program and other initiatives over the years. And we're looking to pave the way for national infrastructure here, so to create something that would be broadly useful across higher education and not particular to the University of California. I'm going to gloss through a couple slides because we're toward the end and I'm standing between you and a plane, to say nothing of lunch. So I think many of us in the room experienced the emergency temporary access service that HathiTrust stood up. Again, we did this lightweight analysis of our own users, a mix of surprising and unsurprising findings from that. People really liked having digital and physical access in some cases if they already had books checked out, and now they were able to use other books digitally, and they could see ways that they might be able to leverage both of those modalities of access going forward. Obviously, we had an unintended long-term natural experiment where some digital non-natives got to push their own boundaries in some ways, and found some interesting use cases, which was on the first slide. There's a particular thing at UC where we are collectively a member of HathiTrust. So like Alan was mentioning, if one campus owned a print book and it was sequestered because the building was closed, we were able to make that digital surrogate available to any UC campus. And our campuses don't have the same level of funding and the same level of libraries and et cetera, et cetera. So UC Merced, very new campus, they don't have a big print collection. And their faculty actually said their access went up because they, and that's within a consortium of R1s and a couple of R2s. But even among us, we have some have-nots who really appreciated that access. I'm going to skip this because this is kind of Alan's talk. So a little bit more about Project Lend. So this is faculty and librarians at UC working together, again, with HathiTrust. We're broken into 4 research teams that are looking at the dimensions of what we need to know to stand up one or more services. So one that I think is really maybe the secret sauce for us is that we have a user requirements team that is, we've engaged a faculty member from UC Irvine who does human-computer interaction research. She and a postdoc that's written into our grant are doing a series of focus groups with faculty in various disciplines, graduate students and postdocs, and then we will proceed onward to undergraduates to find out what they would do, blue sky, if never mind what the law says now, never mind what collections are digital now, never mind the technology, let's imagine a brighter future, find out what that blue sky looks like, and then work backward from there in terms of how do we get from here to there. We also have a team led by a faculty member at UC Berkeley School of Law that's looking into legal frameworks that might be able to stand up one or more services to allow these other kinds of access beyond things where somebody might need the whole book, which I think controlled digital lending already speaks to. And then what technology stacks are either existing or are emerging that might be able to support one or more services, as well as what's the ideal collection scope. So obviously a lot of material has been digitized and a lot of material has not been digitized. And we found out from our own faculty during the pandemic when they had ETOS, they're like, why is volume 15 of this set not addressed when the other volumes are? And I'm like, well, that's the good volume and somebody has it checked out. And so it didn't get scanned when Michigan scanned that shelf because it's the one that's checked out. It's funny how that works. So these 4 teams have to remain really in consort because their findings are going to inform each other. As the user requirements team unearths things that we weren't expecting, because people are engaging with LLMs and thinking about AI and thinking about use cases that were unimaginable a year ago, or at least unimaginable if you weren't really soaking in future sauce. And so that's causing our legal team to have to look at other frameworks that might support different things. We wrote well, no, I won't. I'm getting ahead of myself. So we'll stay in consort with ourselves. Oop, I went 2 slides. Okay, well, I'll go with it. It's skipping a slide, but that's okay. It just showed who our leaders are within UC and HathiTrust. So this is on to our library community group. We do want to make sure we don't design something that works particularly for the University of California and ignores other kinds of users. So our focus groups are drawn from higher education throughout the United States. We did a broad call through a number of channels earlier this fall for faculty and grad students. We'll do one in the spring or in the new year for undergraduates, but we also have the library community group that's populated by some HathiTrust member libraries at the dean or associate dean level at different size institutions, different missions institutions, to try to check our assumptions from time to time and make sure that we aren't we don't have a blind spot because of who we are. There's already been some changes in the landscape as we've been going through this. So we started in January with the team building and onboarding all of our postdocs and things. So one is advances in artificial intelligence, which I think has really helped unlock for our focus groups some imagination, even though AI is pretty, I don't know, half-baked right now in terms of some of the products that are out there and the utilities and what they can do and the cultural assumptions that they're bringing and the mistakes they make and such. It's nevertheless helped people think about, well, if these did work and they worked well, what would I want them to be able to do? And how would that enable me to be more productive in my research, in my teaching, and in some cases in my clinical care? And toward that, the UC, the US Copyright Office, did had a notice of inquiry that we responded to. So Project Lend did write a brief for that to advocate for the needs of higher education as it might pertain to AI and its ability to interact with corpuses of texts, which could include a lot of material still held in copyright. Obviously, Hachette and Internet Archive is trucking along, and we have prepared a document that articulates what we would want to see in an amicus brief. We anticipate signing on to one or two other amicus briefs that are kind of in progress rather than writing our own, but we're keeping an eye on that to make sure that whatever we do need to advocate for as we're talking to users and thinking about 5 and 10 years out, that those points get made, at least in some amicus brief. So our user requirements research, I just want to touch on this a little bit, and then we'll take questions, I think, for both talks. So we're proceeding in several phases. So we started with expert interviews. We talked to some librarians who had done some maybe smaller scale research around user needs and how people interact with digital books and what their user experience is like, as well as several platforms and companies that provide ebooks. So we actually got pretty good, very good, I should say, participation in those expert interviews, even from some for-profit vendors who are interested in the findings of our project. We're now into focus groups where we're talking with people in higher education and finding out what they would want to do and pushing them to think ever more creatively about how their life could be different. And then following that, we'll do some deep dives with specific users who brought up use cases that maybe we want to get more information on, or whose experience we want to use to build a persona to help us shape a service design. So our timeline, so far we've had a huge startup phase, kind of scoping the project and making sure that everybody understood what we were trying to do and such, and a fun several months of getting IRB approval at multiple campuses, which, well, buy me a drink sometime and I'll tell you about that. And that we're currently in the midst of focus groups with faculty and grad students. Again, we're going to do undergrads in the new year. I think we want to double down on digital humanists as well, so grad students and faculty who are working in computational ways or other kind of ways with corpuses of texts. So you'll probably see some more recruitment efforts from us in that regard. And then we're teeing ourselves up to have kind of summer or fall have a report out on the project and building a service design. I should say we're not going to stand up a service that I know of. Now, HathiTrust is at the table, so they're hearing all this, but we're not going to stand up a service within the timeline of this grant. The output of this grant is to do this research and build a service design, and then it will be up to some value of us to build that service. So seeking to expand lawful access, but we are proceeding at the pace of academia, as I just mentioned. So we're doing due diligence and want to make sure that we create something that would work for your Office of General Counsel, because that's really where that's where a lot of things go to die in terms of like trying to push the envelope on things. And we want to make sure that your OGC feels comfortable and confident proceeding with whatever service exists as an opt-in option. We are doing investigatory research and hope to have these kind of blue sky work products where we can describe what users really want, but as well as have applied outcomes in terms of service design that HathiTrust and or other institutions could stand up. And trying to consult with our library community group and with audiences like you to make sure that we're doing what you think you would want. Thank you, and we will take questions for both groups.